Hello, everybody, and welcome to the advanced class. We have our next lesson. I think it's the 8th one, and it promises to deliver a lot of new information. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. The title is Like an Open Book, or An Open Book. Now, this is sort of a play on words because if someone is an open book, it means they're easy to read. You can understand them. They're pretty transparent. But we're literally going to talk about books as well. So it has a double meaning. The French have a word or a phrase, double entendre, double meaning or understanding. My French isn't very good, but I hope you understood that. Stephen King, the very famous, well-known, renowned, if you want to say that word, renowned writer, I think Knowned, the renowned writer, fiction writer, said there's no such thing as a happy ending, certainly not in his novels, but maybe for others there is. We're going to talk about books. We're going to look at the grammar. We're going to look at inversions. You can see here some interesting ways to vary your sentence structure as you speak. And we're going to describe books and films, and we're going to look at some foreign words because many of us read books that aren't by English-speaking authors, although they might be in English or they might be in your own language, which actually brings me to the question, do you read mostly in your language, in English, or a different language? Let's talk about that during the next live. And I'm going to go through a little of this, and then I will discuss some points in detail. Listening and speaking, obviously the listening parts I'm going to let you do on your own, aided and assisted by the audio files you can see here. So I'm going to let you do this first section on your own, accompanied by the audio files. But here I made a note for myself, and I squared it just to make sure I wouldn't forget, because they talk about books. And I think one of the things they ask is, or a question I'm often asked, do you have a favorite book? I think two questions people like to ask others: what's your favorite movie? And what's your favorite book? And I generally give atypical answers. Let me write that down. Atypical means not typical, not usual. And I think I used the word renowned author earlier with Stephen King, so you can see that there. But this, I give atypical answers because, not because I want to, it's just because that's the way it is. So my favorite books are, and I have them here, I don't know if you can see my notes, but A Wrinkle in Time was the first book I read like front to back. I was pretty proud of myself. I started reading quite late. I think that's disappointing for me. I regret that. I had a great desire to read, but no ability to focus. I was just too excited, and no one really forced me to do that. So I didn't start reading much until I was into my teens, late teens even, I suppose. But I had a great desire to read. I just couldn't focus. And then another book, again, this is nonfiction, that's why it's atypical. A Wrinkle in Time is fiction, but recently I read a lot of nonfiction because I'm a historian. I have a lot to read, so I feel guilty reading fiction when I should be reading my own stuff for my books and articles. So one book is by my author, by my professor at Oxford. He wrote a history of the Habsburg Empire, this Austrian empire, in the middle part, in the early middle, we say the early modern period, so 15th, 16th, 17th centuries. It is so inspiring for me to read. And you know what I thought I would do? I thought I would share with you two snippets, two excerpts from his book that really, people ask, how have you been influenced with your speaking? Maybe you use big words sometimes. It's because of my professor. I'm going to read you the beginnings of both of these. I'm really excited to share it. Actually, I've never done this before, but we're going to do it now. So here's the beginning of his book. And you'll get a little bit of an idea. I'll just read just the first line or two. You'll get an idea. He just writes like no one else I've seen, at least no living author. Again, this is history now. It's not fiction, so it's a different style. So don't compare fiction and nonfiction. If you're writing nonfiction, fiction, you have more liberties with the language. With nonfiction, with history and things, you have to abide by the rules, but within that, he's very creative, as we'll see here. No proper nomenclature exists for the political entity whose consolidation is the subject of this book. That is so beautiful. And it's something I never could have said before having him as my supervisor. I've learned and reread a lot of his writings, so I try to inculcate or absorb a lot of what he says. I'll continue because it's so beautiful. Observers, then and later, commonly described it as Austria, but the usage, at least when extended beyond the diplomatic and political relations between the dynasty and the rest of Europe, is incorrect and mischievous. Mischievous is a great word here. I'm going to share one more. I hope they let me do it. It's sort of the same. I think so. Here we go. Here's the first, it's the first chapter, The False Dawn, Renaissance and Reformation. Here's just the beginning of it. By the middle of the 16th century, the ethos of the Austrian Habsburgs land was Protestant. That cannot be a precise statement. Rather, it indicates what religion was not. Catholic observance ebbed and flowed, ebbed away. Vestments were stored up and sold, relics and hallowed observances decried, actually decried. Sacraments no longer revered. So if you look here, what's interesting is not only the complex sentence structure, and he does use a lot of inverting techniques that we're going to look at today, inversions, but the way he thinks and expresses his ideas are very interesting. Look here, Catholic observance ebbed and flowed. We have a colon, and then we have like a phrasal list of 3 things that you could observe. Ebbing away. Ebbing means getting less strong, less important. And so it's just a really beautiful, a pretty complex structure, but one that I greatly benefited from. I pored over his texts over and over and over because I wanted to speak and write as he does. I don't do it as well, but I'm a lot better because of my supervisor, Professor Evans, so I'll give him his credit. Let's go back now to the text. But what I want to ask you is, what are your favorite books? And which ones have influenced you in what way? And maybe you can talk about that in a discussion or lesson class. All right, now what we're going to do is move down. The reading you can do if you want, it's optional. But what I want to do here is look at the word murderer. Murderer is so to murder is the verb, the person is the murderer, and that's difficult to pronounce. Murderer. One more time, murderer. Rrr at the end. That sounds strange, and we're going to keep that going because I'm going to look at a few things here. We add the ER, as many of you know, to refer to people. So let's go ahead and do that now. We've got some pronunciation. Here are a few others like murderer that we can use in English that describe people that do the verb. So to murder is a murderer. Those who discover are called discoverers. Discoverers. They're also called explorers as well, if you want to keep it, make it easier to pronounce. And then someone who wanders around, wanders as walking aimlessly or without an intention or goal. They're called wanderers. Wanderers. And finally, we have bearer. Now, a bearer is something we never use except in one specific instance. They are a bearer of bad news. A bearer of bad news. That means you're bringing bad news. So that is not always positive. I'm wondering if someone who ponders is called a ponderer. You know what's interesting? You can use this ER after verbs. Even if they don't exist, you can create it as a person, and it's sort of interesting. So now let's go down to some of the others here. We have EROR. These are very simple. I think most of us know these. Teacher. So these are basic ones. This is not dealing with pronunciation, obviously, but this is just a list of verbs. We can add ER, and it becomes the person who does these actions. So baker, leader, writer, runner, all of these are pretty basic, and we learned in earlier levels of our English language development. Flyer, I'm not sure that's a word actually, because not many people fly, and so that probably should go down underneath. Although what's interesting is there is a flyer, it's a slightly different word though. FLIER is the thing you put under people's doors if you're selling these little leaflets or something. These are called flyers. And finally, we have, here's a false friend. So flyer is probably a false friend. So go ahead and mark that. And cook and cooker. This is, I think, very common if you're teaching. People automatically assume if hunter is someone who hunts, cooker is someone who cooks. And in that fact, that's not the case. To cook is the cook cooks is how that looks. And so that is one we want to pay attention to. And then finally, I thought I would do a few more less common words that add the ER. Arbitrate becomes arbitrator with an OR, and you arbitrate in legal negotiations. There's a labor arbitration. It goes to arbitration, so this is done by the arbiter. A curator is someone who often works in a museum, who sort of develops a particular exhibition. Innovator, we know about. A procrastinator might be us, but it might be our students who don't want to do their homework on time. Don't be a procrastinator in this class, please. And then mediator, we know about those who mediate negotiations. That's the common collocation. I've put common collocations in brackets. So mediate negotiations, you facilitate. A facilitator is often found at seminars or conferences. And then we have speculators. Now, early on, it used to be oil and gas speculators. You would speculate on the gas, you would buy a plot of land and hope there was oil in it. We would also call these land speculators. If you were looking for oil and gas, you were a land speculator based on your sort of senses. And now, of course, we have high-tech equipment. You can bid on that land and then drill down and see if you are about to be rich. All right, let's move back up. All right, so that is the murderer. That's murderer. Let's go to the vocabulary. We're going to be assisted by the audio file here, but I just want to go through a few of these words because I like them, and I don't think you can ever get enough pronunciation. So let's go through these. Creepy, fast-moving, gripping. So this is a grip. If someone has a strong grip, it's when they shake your hand. They have a strong grip. Oh, he's got a strong grip. That's how you hold someone's hand. So if someone's grip, if a movie's gripping, it's because it's so good you can't get away from it. It's like having a strong grip. You can't get away from the handshake. You're going to learn what all these words mean in a moment when you do the exercise. I just want to go through the pronunciation. Haunting. We might associate that with Halloween. Heartwarming. Oh, very nice. Heavy going. Implausible. Implausible. And of course, the opposite is plausible. Intriguing. Moving. And thought-provoking. Thought-provoking. All right. Now, you're going to go ahead and do those exercises and check your answers with the audio file, and now we're going to move to inversions. Now, I sort of introduced this topic when I read my Oxford professor's writing. He uses lots of interesting syntactical inventions, one of them being inversions. To invert is to reverse or switch the order. And we have a few of them here, not only, never, not until, no sooner, and only. We're going to go through these in detail in the grammar bank, which we're going to get to in a minute. I will just tell you very personally the ones I use. Not only do I use this one, I use it often. Never have I read. I almost never begin a sentence with never. I don't know why. If you do begin with never, it's very dramatic. Never have I heard that in my life. That is a very dramatic sentence versus I have never heard that in my life. So the normal order is I've never heard that in my life. If you want to emphasize that you've not one time heard that, then you'd put never first, because it's quite a dramatic change. Never have I heard that in my life. And of course, we'll talk about the grammar implications of an inversion. You have to switch the verb and the subject. Not until, honestly, I rarely use that. No sooner I like, and only is quite common. Only when I finish, although I don't use it that much, only when she leaves can we sleep. All right, so you can go ahead and answer those. The answer key is in the teacher's guide that I've attached at the bottom of this PDF. And we're gonna move now to the grammar bank, and we're gonna go through some of these. I just want to highlight, because you've got homework here and you've also got, you'll have a chance to practice these, and I want to use these during our next live. So you've got homework here, but one of your speaking homeworks is to use these with a speaking partner, in the speaking club, or with me during the live. So we've got a few options. Not only is the plot great, but it's also well written. So we have not only, but also. That is the sort of natural flow there. Not only, but also. Not until you behave like an adult will we treat you. Not until is fine. I don't use that very much. I'm not sure it's that common. Never have I heard. That's again for dramatic emphasis. Never again is common. Never again will I go to that cinema. The floors were sticky. No one likes sticky floors. No sooner had the match started than it began to rain. This is a very nice sentence structure. Now, here's what I want you to do as a student, because I know some of you even have taught these concepts and you've learned them. But as a student, I don't want you to try to do all of these or say all of these or sort of use all of these unless you've already used half of them. I'd like you to focus on using two of these. The two you like the most, not the two I like the most, because I think they're all of equal standing. There's no one that's better. I told you the ones I prefer, and that's a preference, a personal choice. And it suits me. It suits, I don't know, my personality. I don't know how deep we want to go with this, but the point is we all like different phrases. And so choose two you like and make it a point to try to use it this week. Not only did you forget the window, but you also not until. All right, so we have these expressions. Rarely have I met. I like rarely. I don't use hardly very often. I hardly use hardly, if I'm honest. But I do like rarely. Rarely have I met a more industrious person, a more talented person. All right. Now, here's here I just highlighted a few of the grammar rules. So we have the examples above, and then we have the rules that correspond to the numbers. But in the structure with a negative adverbial expression, these are negative adverbial expressions, we invert the subject and the auxiliary verb or verb. So you can see it here, we invert it. not only is the plot. So we would say the plot is great. That's a standard sentence. But when we apply the inversion, not only is the plot great, but it's also written. So the second half is in a standard English format, but the first part's inverted, subject verb. So not only is the plot great, but it's also well written. You're going to have to practice that very deliberately. What I would do is even maybe repeat those first 5 sentences in number 1 over and over until you get more comfortable. Then start to apply your own, or do the homework, which you'll have to do, and then use one of those sentences. I'm a big believer in this. I always choose sentences I like, and I repeat them. So, I read part of my professor's book. If you saw on one of the pages, I was writing and ticking. I own that book, so I was able to do it. I was marking the sentences either that had a lot of historical importance, or that more commonly that I just loved how it sounded. So do the same here. Pick a few sentences you really like, and then just repeat them until they become your own. And then you can offer variations on that same sentence structure. So for example, number 2, not only did you forget to shut the door, once you know this really well, you can do things like, not only did I not only did I walk 10,000 steps, but I ate very healthily as well. So you begin to be able to use it very freely, but it doesn't happen overnight. You have to practice, practice, practice. There's no magic here in terms of expanding your linguistic sort of repertoire, if I can borrow a French musical term, repertoire. All right, I did that because we're going to look at foreign words at the end of this. Dramatic effect, as I mentioned, that's right. And they make a very good point. Use it occasionally for dramatic effect, these inversions, but not consistently, because it starts to have a very unnatural feel to it. All right, and now we're going to go to the listening. You will do the listening. I will send you the listening to do. And then we have a bit more reading, a lot of reading. I'm going to let you, that's an optional piece of homework. And then we have something very interesting, the foreign words. Now, I did assign this. Foreign words, I think, can be divided into several categories. Some of them are so old that we obviously don't consider them foreign now, even if they have a foreign root or origin. And others we've recently borrowed, and those I would consider the real foreign words, in that they're not so common in English yet. So what I've done, there's some really interesting ones here. None of these I think are very common, but they're very popular and interesting because they're words that don't have really exact English equivalents. You've got to sort of express or describe what's going on. And what I love about these words is one word in that language, and in English we have to express it in 3 or 4 or a whole sentence or 2. All right, so here we go. Now, I've also created a list. Let's see how many of these you know. I suspect you know quite a few. So we go here. And the most common foreign words, I've provided some definitions. Obviously, some of these you know about. So cafe, everyone knows about. Hamburger, I think all of us know about. Pizza, ballet, salsa. Salsa is interesting. It's a dance, but it's also a very tasty sauce that we eat with chips, especially if you live in Mexico or, like me, near a Mexican restaurant in the US. Ballet, oh, sorry. Then we have tsunami. We know the word tsunami. It's international. I think in all languages, we've adopted the Japanese word tsunami. Karaoke, I think, is also international, that's been adopted. Now, you might say it differently, so let's practice the pronunciation. Karaoke is how we say it in English. I find that a really terrible version. I know some people say my karaoke or something. You might give more presence to the vowels. but karaoke is how we say it in English. I'm not proud of that pronunciation, by the way. So if you want to keep your own, I will understand. Safari is Swahili. I think that's really exciting and interesting. Rodeo is where they're riding bulls. Fiesta is a party, and its cousin siesta we also use as well. At least in the US, we use siesta because we have so many Spanish speakers here from Mexico. Siesta is this short nap in the middle of the afternoon. I had a siesta. Cliché is French, and we do now. There's sometimes questions about should we keep this accent or not, and it depends. If it's a new word that's been borrowed into English, normally they keep the accent, and then over time you slowly lose the Frenchness of it, and you just have it regular. Cliché is in the middle. Some people think it should have the accent still, and others say no, it's fine without. Kindergarten is German. Kinder is kid. Garden is garden. And we use that word in English. Kindergarten is that grade before you start primary school. Entrepreneur is a very difficult French word to pronounce. Entrepreneur. And guru is very nice. Guru is Hindi, and paparazzi is Italian. All right. When we meet next, I'll be curious to see what sort of foreign words you use or which ones you like. And I think that's all. I'm going to let you get to it. You've got quite a bit of homework here. So happy studying. Enjoy the process, and I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.